Good morning and welcome to a special meeting of the Ulysses Town Board. It is Wednesday, September 11th, 2024, and I'll call this meeting to order at 9:13. May we please have a roll call?
Sure. Ms. Weatherby.
Present.
Ms. Olson.
Present.
Mr. Boggs.
Present.
And we do not have an agenda, a formal agenda, because we're just going over budget review, and we do not, to the best of my knowledge, intend to take any action today by any formal votes on anything. So that's what we're here for.
Okay, so you were speaking about court security.
Yes, like I said, back when I first became judge, we call it pre-trial days when the assistant DA is on our court. It's usually a very busy court day. We always had T-Bird PD on contract to be here per hour, per diem per hour. And then when COVID came, things really slowed down. The court closed for a period of several weeks, and that kind of security went away because court was very slow. Even when we started to start back up, everything was by video, by Zoom and stuff like that. But now we're seeing a different change. We're getting more and more busy now at court. A lot more cases are coming in, and at some point we'll have to maybe readdress the security issue as far as having somebody here on my pre-trial day, which is the fourth Wednesday of the month, just for added security.
Okay.
And what I indicated before, what I'm doing now, if I see a case that looks somewhat suspect as far as a possible violence, I contact Twinsburg Police, have them send an officer over, just stand by for 15-20 minutes until that case is done and they leave. So, and anybody who's transported from the jail, they're all on lockdown, leg shackles, chain belt, handcuffs. So, they're pretty secure when they're in court. And at no time are they ever unhandcuffed for any court proceeding.
So you think that the $500 that you requested is adequate for
right now,
right now?
but I mean, I just like to, put maybe have an open forum at some point if we're getting to a point where things are getting busier and busier and busier, to have another discussion about, security and maybe enhance that or actually go back with a contract with T-Bird PD at that point, or whoever. Probably, I mean, we can with anybody, but for just to have somebody here for only at one court day per month.
I know that we do every year request what the cost is. I speak to Chief Nelson, and we adopt in the organizational meeting that amount that we pay, because we don't know in advance.
Mhm.
Like right now, they haven't set their fees just because the village is off cycle with us.
Okay,
So I do know that that's included in our organizational meeting.
what the rate is.
The rate is.
Mhm.
And so I think by doing that, we're effectively authorizing a continued relationship.
Okay.
And what would be really helpful is if you start to see this picking up, to give us a heads up, because it's one of those numbers that it's such a small number overall, it'd be easy to get lost. So
Sure.
if you start to feel like you're using more court security,
Mhm.
then we'll want to reevaluate it mid-year.
But right now, it's just a case by case basis.
Right.
I feel pretty secure here with myself. I can take care of myself here in the courtroom. And, we have, the panic buttons and stuff like that. Or if I feel something that's not quite right, I make a phone call and make sure they're on board. So.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on the spending?
We talked about the dues are pretty straightforward. They're set
Yeah.
forth by the state and set forth by the Tompkins County Magistrates Association for like myself and Angela. Supplies, that's kind of a guess sometimes on supplies, but basically, just. And law books, we used to buy law books every year, but I don't anymore. There's kind of a waste. Everything's online. It's current. I can go online and search the resource center and get whatever I need from the resource center for free. So they also have a line that I can call, speak with one of their attorneys. If I have a legal question I can't answer, they can help me out with that. So, as far as our resources for research on legal issues is very clear for us.
so for the public, there was a meeting going on before this, but because there were not 3 board members present, which constitutes a quorum, it was not previously recorded. So I came in and triggered the need to go into public session. But for the benefit of the audience and for everybody here, you noted that cases are increasing,
Yes,
but revenue is obviously decreasing over time.
yes.
And so would you mind just for the record to elaborate a little bit about how that's happening? Because sometimes I think people think, well, the revenue is going down, so there must not be any work, which is in fact not the case. There's just been some changes.
We're having difficulty. I believe it's gonna be 3 years ago. This past June, I'm correct, I believe. The state of New York, we used to be able to suspend a person for fail to pay fines. We can't do that anymore. So a person comes into court, if they fail to appear on the initial charge, they can be suspended for failure to appear. Which prompts them, to come into court, take care of the ticket. However, there's no means for us to collect the fines. So I assess a fine and surcharge, they don't pay it. They cannot no longer be suspended for fail to pay fines.
And you're speaking about their driver's license, is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So, before I could have their license suspended for fail to pay fine, I can't do that. So the only other mechanism that we have is to send out reminder letters, which don't work. We can do a confession of judgment, which is filed with the county clerk's office, which I think I've only ever had 2 of those actually end up with the fines being paid. So it's very frustrating for me as a judge. I have no means, not like on a DWI where the person's on a conditional discharge. That's the term of the conditional discharge, is to pay the fine and surcharge and or DNA fees or whatever's there. So I do have some muscle to enforce that as a conditional discharge ticks on before it expires in 1 year. If they fail to pay the fine and surcharge, I can bring them back in for a violation of the conditional discharge with a possibility of incarceration if they don't pay. So anyhow, it's frustrating for the court because, we have a whole stack of tickets in there. A stack of tickets that people just don't pay their fines. We have a stack of tickets of people who have not appeared. It's every day in court. It's an occurrence where several people don't show up. So it's kind of a struggle with courts.
Angie, is there a report? I'm not asking you to do extra work, but I'm asking, is there a report that already exists that you can pull that show out the amount of outstanding fines, not who it's connected to, none of that, but just the amount of outstanding fines in a given period of time?
I believe there is. We started that when they came out with the non-enforcement of fail to pay. I don't know I really haven't looked at it a whole lot yet, but I believe there is a special report that they came out with when they decided that they weren't going to penalize people for the inability to pay.
And another point I should bring up is that way back during COVID, the DA's office came out with a special plea bargain system for traffic tickets to assist people during COVID with their finances and stuff like that. So what we're also seeing now, a lot of the different sections of law are being reduced down to lesser included offenses that a person can plead to. And it's not of my doing, it's of the DA's office. So I'll give you an example. The person is stopped for speeding. If it's under 19 miles per hour, they're permitted to plead to what's called opening door unsafely instead of a speeding violation, which is a non-point violation, and it carries a lesser fine. Surcharge remains the same. But typically on your normal speeding violation, the fine starts at $90 and goes to $300. On opening door unsafely, it starts at $0 and goes to $150. So, trying to have compassion, I try to model my fines all about the person. In every case is different. I look at their abstracts, their driving histories, how they present in court, what they may have for a reason why this happened, and try to modify my fines to meet those needs of the people. But we are seeing a lot of the tickets now being reduced down on a daily basis. So, and I'm not sure if that's gonna be the standard norm now forever, or if that'll eventually change. And the those plea offers will go away. I don't know.
Well, I think it's important, thank you for explaining that, because I didn't know that detail of it. And if there is a report, I think it'd be helpful to use, because for the public, I think it's important to recognize that in 2019, the revenue from fines and fees, the revenue that was brought in for the court was $55,000 roughly. And we're projecting $12,000 this year. And you're still seeing a lot of activity. It's not a reduction. There's not a parallel reduction in activity. But what this constitutes is another unfunded mandate by the state of New York. And so when we're looking at, this is in the A fund, and we're looking at A fund numbers, we've talked in public last night, we were talking about increases in minimum wage are pushing up costs. 14% healthcare consortium projected increase in healthcare is pushing up costs. Fire and EMS are pushing up costs. This is another place that is beyond the town's control that we have to, and the court is important. I think we need to fund the court appropriately. You are doing an excellent job. I hear compliments about how this court is run throughout the county. And so I'm grateful for the court and how you're managing it. But this, for the public to understand, when that revenue doesn't come in fines and fees, and many people have a variety of opinions on the appropriateness of that. And I'm not commenting on that one way or the other, but the boots on the ground level, if it's not coming in fines and fees, it is coming in the tax levy.
Mhm.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So this is another push on the budget for 2025.
And one more thing they add about traffic tickets, there's also been a change. Any no inspection, any no registration or expired registration are automatic dismissals if they provide proof of inspection or registration. We didn't have that before.
Never.
So even though the person got the car re-registered or inspected, usually a fine and surcharge was imposed. Now it's an automatic dismissal. So, and we do have a lot of tickets that are no inspection
Mhm.
and unregistered that come through, especially in the first part of the first calendar month,
Yeah.
because they change colors. That's another thing to keep in mind, that those tickets now, they're all being dismissed, pretty much. I'd say 99% are dismissed. So just,
99.8.
yeah,
Well,
And
there's
I
that
just
1%.
want to add though, that is also through the DA's office,
Yeah,
through their
that's what I
plea
said.
bargaining
Yeah,
system. But
Again, outside of the town's control, outside of the court's
Yeah.
control.
So do we actually think, I mean,
yes, we'll meet that.
we'll meet this 12,000 projected
Yeah.
by the end of this year, so for
Actually, I
next
think-
I
year.
think we have,
It's gonna be probably better than that.
yeah.
Probably closer to 14, maybe
Okay.
15, but it's hard to predict
Wait.
from month to month.
So usually once you get into back to school, the cooler weather, the heating season, holidays, that's our slower
Mhm.
phase generally until tax return. And tax return, I usually do very well when I have my 30 or 60 day where I go through my entire stock of everything that I haven't heard from and send out letters or recontact, which I did not get to this last year. We started on it and I got like a quarter of the way through with like, I think I had 2 people pay. So I went on to more pressing like FBI request type stuff, because now with the ammunition having to go through checks before they purchase, the increase in request for pistol permits, etc. And now FBI is asking for more information and certified records. So they have amped up their required documentation in order to process and approve applications that are coming in as well. And that's 100%. No, you don't get anything out of it other than security that some inappropriate people might not be given the privilege.
Okay.
But again, there's no revenue
Right,
associated with
right.
that.
That's
That's
just
new
your work.
responsibility in Angie's
Right.
office.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I do think we're being conservative
keeping
with
busy.
our projections for
Yes.
this year
Yes.
and for next year, but it's hard to predict.
Mhm.
And so I just used an average of $1,000 a month, and we've been a little over that so far this year.
Okay.
So,
And I think just worth being said, being reserved on the expense side, but yet trying to be fair and cautious and prepared along with the more moderate conservative revenue side so that the town has a little bit of teetering if needed, where things aren't an emergency flip flop, what are we gonna do? Not have the funds anywhere, tighter budget. So we just went with a little more reserved.
yeah, so if you did have an anticipated expense, but you had extra revenue, you could use that to cover it,
Mhm.
basically.
But also keep in mind that, I mean, this goes back when I first became a judge, they preach and preach and preach, in judge school, that revenue was not really the basis for the court.
No.
And the judges should not really think about that when they're out in the court and, issuing fines and surcharges and stuff like that. Because in the past, there was a major issue. A lot of pressure was put on the courts that we need money, 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 money. So I'm doing the best that I can do to be fair to the people that come before the court, to listen to their stories, to be fair and equal, equitable as far as, what fines and stuff I do assess. So,
I thought you were very fair with the one session I sat in on.
thank you.
Well, I was
It was
impressed.
very well, very
She's
well.
an
You're
observer.
so good.
I was an
at-
observer, yes,
Yeah.
I was behind. It's not out here.
And I wasn't suggesting that I thought you should be private.
No, I
simply
understand.
I simply want the public to understand, because we did have a public hearing last
Mhm.
night, and there are members of the public who are opposed to us lifting the tax cap, lifting and considering a budget that raises the tax cap. And I think it's really important that the public understands, to the best of our ability, the pressures the budget is under.
Well, transparency is the best. That's all that's what I always say.
Well, I don't have any further questions. I think it's very good to be conservative in revenue next year, because it's gonna be interesting to see when things level off. Because they have continued to decline in terms of amounts. And we might hit maybe, and 2024 may be the leveling off. If you're at 15, if Blixie's gets at 15, that would only, be less than $1,000 off from 2023's actual. So we'll see, maybe we've hit the leveling point, but we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So TBD.
Right, thank you both.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Like I say, if you ever have any questions, anybody, feel free to stop at any time. If you got any questions for me, come and sit before it, whatever you want to do. So. Thank you.
If you want to see the swing of
The arc of justice.
what's coming through the court system.
Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
know.
So are we ready for the next?
I believe we are. Chris is up next.
Chris is up next. So this, again, this is an excerpt from the general fund, which was a lot of paper I handed out on Monday. And just to make it easier to digest the information, what we're focusing on today. There's this, Chris. And this section, this half hour is scheduled to talk about the clerk's office, but also the central services and town hall, and there's a few other things on this expenditure list because they were in the middle. But the focus is on what Chris's area of responsibility. So those are the expenditures that you see listed on the sheet from the general fund. Then there's attached detail of each of those contractual spending accounts on a separate handout, and there's a lot of information there. And then also the revenues associated with mostly revenues associated with the clerk's office. Again, there's one in the middle that is in the scheme of thing, is the way it printed. So. They're just sharing with you what the information is, that you have in front of you. So, Carissa, did you want me to just walk through it, or do you wanna speak to it, or how do you wanna do that?
You can, yeah, there's not a lot of, nothing big and major changing.
Okay. So, starting with A 1410, which is the clerk's office, budget area. There's the two, positions there. The clerk's position and the deputy clerk. I did make a note there that when you compare budget to budget, mid-year, the number of hours per week changed. For the deputy clerk position, so that's why the numbers look like they're changing as much as they are from budget to budget, but. That the modified, that's a shifting that happened mid-year, so,
Someone from like 20 to 24 hours.
yes. Exactly. But focusing on the contractual items, 1410.4, there's a detail sheet here that you can look at all the items that are included in there. There's clerk software. We did have to add in the tax software. You knew about that, right?
Yeah,
Melissa?
yeah, the county has always paid for all of the municipalities' tax software, but for as long as I can remember, so probably maybe 15 years. But they've decided not to do that anymore, so it's just a new $700 for us.
Yep. And then there's software for the online, so various, basically all the software to support the work of the clerk's office. Supplies, conference and training, memberships, publicity. I'm not sure what publicity is.
I put that in there for, maybe it doesn't need to be in that area. Just for if there's any like ads we want to do for various things to let people know about.
What's going on?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
FYI.
I think it makes sense there
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
Chris is the communications manager.
Yeah.
So I think it makes logical
Absolutely.
to have her in there.
just to
And we
make
have
sure.
comp plan stuff coming up. We've got lots of stuff going on next
so
year.
there's not a comp plan. but-
Yeah.
You know, true, like that, my budget. No, but we
Don't touch
definitely have stuff come up that it's. that
Yeah,
more
that you might wanna
town-wide
let the
interest.
general public
Yeah.
know
Yes.
about certain things going on in town.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, of course, supplies, the envelopes, for example, for tax collection. So I just point out too that sometimes, some towns have the tax collector and the clerk separate, but they're combined here. That's my understanding, right,
Correct.
Carissa? Okay. Just thought I'd point that out if you were making any comparisons,
Many decades ago, it was, they were separate positions.
right? So all of that stuff, keeping in mind that Chris is also the tax collector, that's all combined in here in the clerk's budget.
Okay.
So the contractual budget is actually going down from the modified budget because there was a special project plan last year. Or I should say, in the current year, that is not repeated next year.
Yeah, we were considering moving to exploring and getting new updated clerk software. But after seeing how much time it took with the water software combined with a couple of new upgrades that they made to the current software, we're gonna stay where we are now.
So the next area that applies to the clerk's area of responsibility is the records management, which is 1460.4. And again, this is all related to contract, there's no salaries associated with this, but all of the supplies and subscriptions and software costs related to the records management. I don't know if you want to speak to that more, Chris, in terms of what it is that you do in each of these areas.
This is kind of an area that always needs more attention than it gets. But it's been helpful to have Molly to collaborate with on the highway and planning and zoning stuff to kind of implement updates to managing records and scanning some of the backlog of things from the last few years.
Then we do have to pay to make sure that our code is updated. Right, and our local
Yep.
laws are updated. and all
That's
that.
E-code.
Yeah, and so this was one of the numbers that I was talking about last night at the town board meeting, that there are costs associated with updates to the code. And so it's something that, can you talk about how you try to bundle things to help reduce costs?
Yeah, so every time we make a change to our law, it has to go through, aside from our own internal processes and postings and legal reviews. It goes through general code, which also does a legal review and, kind of looks through our code to make sure that any place that specific law is referenced also gets updated in other places in the code, et cetera. So that costs money also. And then but basically, so it's one way that we can help save money is to kind of bundle things together so they can do things at once. But on the other hand, you don't really want to wait you want to keep the code as up to date as possible, so.
So the line, the projected line of $1,500. Lexi, do you know what we spent year to date on that?
Yes. And that was,
Because
oh,
this
on that
number-
specific item?
Yeah.
No.
So I think that's something we're gonna wanna look at.
So in the past, we've kind of gone back and forth between what comes out of the records management CE versus like the zoning things that might make more sense to take them out of the B fund
Okay,
for code updates, so.
okay,
It's kind of a
so you,
year conversation.
okay, so you're looking at law, you probably cover then the laws that are A fund, that would cover townwide.
Right,
And then, so I think that's something we're gonna wanna look at, though. It's a small
Yeah.
thing, but yet I think it's an important thing based on last night's conversation, because just so you know, Blixie, last night, the chair of the planning board wants to initiate an effort to look at making zoning changes in advance of the comp plan being finished, in advance of undertaking a broader zoning update, to try and, I think the intention is to fix kind of some low hanging fruit
Mhm.
in the code. But there are costs associated with doing that are not considered in this budget. And so I think something that we're gonna bring back to when the full town board, at the regular town board meetings, when we do budget review, is what those kinds of costs look like, because we're gonna need to live in a world where we can, we're affording to pay for those
Okay,
potential changes that were not planned for in this budget.
okay.
yeah, so maybe we can come up with kind of a generic-ish model of what it generally costs for a, small kind of law change versus a larger one.
Yeah, because sometimes it triggers a review, and that's where it gets expensive, is that if the law change requires them to go through other sections. Right, like, I would imagine that the law change to consolidate to a single justice did not require them to go through like zoning code related to land use. Right,
Yep.
there's not intersection with there, but when you start changing land use, there may be impacts that require, and our zoning code is quite extensive. Is that good? Starts driving costs, so.
So question in that C line moving down. Down like the last. Like 3 or 4 lines, it doesn't look like the lines.
Right, these, if you look side to side, they don't necessarily line up exactly.
Okay,
This is just information from last year, so they're not necessarily on the exact same lines. I think they are when they can be, but there
Yeah,
was some
like
things
okay,
that didn't apply this year that were in last year, yeah.
So for example, the quote that we got for the justice law, which is being updated right now, was about $700. That's pretty short.
Yeah. So that's the cheap side.
Yeah.
It only goes up from there.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this category of records management?
Nothing.
Okay, so the next one I thought might be helpful to speak on is town hall. I know that, you know, we kind of, there's a variety of things that factor in here. It's not just the clerk's office. But I just thought it'd be helpful to look at this because I think the clerk's office manages most of this. Is that a correct? Okay, assumption. Again, the town hall personal service, I'll just point out, and we did talk about this on Monday as well. That we are looking at utilizing DPW staff to do some work around this building. To basically be more efficient, save money, et cetera. So there is some funds budgeted there where there haven't been before. But it's really just the allocation of time of existing staff. To this purpose, so. We don't really have any experience with that yet, but I think everybody felt like this was a reasonable number.
Okay.
And then in equipment and capital outlay, there are. Items, so in the prior year, you'll notice there's a lot of stuff on the list of projects and different things that were happening. But in the 2025 budget, we're basically just budgeting for sort of what we anticipate as standard replacements. So that's computer replacements, monitors and furnishings. There's not a specific project or a specific thing identified at this point, but just setting aside funds to make sure we can manage things as we need to and as they come up for normal wear and tear and replacement. So that's what that is. Any questions on that or comments, Carissa or Taylor?
So if we have some recommendations come back from the safety plan and the safety study that was done, we haven't accounted for that yet,
We actually haven't done the safety study.
Right.
We just did the,
the initial assessment.
we did the initial assessment.
Yes,
and right now, we have not budgeted to do the full one because of what the quote came back at.
Okay,
So, it's like $140,000.
are you serious?
I'm not joking. When I say
Okay.
that,
Wow.
so doesn't mean we can't think of ways to do something,
Wow,
but
that's just an assessment.
well, that's to do. That, yes, so that would do all the physical upgrades also that they're recommending. So we paid for the assessment and the suggestions and to do the work to do, so
Okay.
the full gamut of what that is being recommended.
Gotcha.
So we paid for, I'm sorry, to be clear, we paid for the assessment. The assessment said, the assessment, I think was like $1,500, it wasn't.
Yeah,
But the work itself will need to be decided how it's going to happen.
Okay.
And we probably have to look out a combination of reserves. But I would like to finish this, but I did forget, I'd like to talk about the election CE line before we're done here, because I had an idea. I had a question for you
okay.
about that. That just came to me,
Well,
so,
we can finish this
yes.
equipment discussion
Exactly.
if there's anything else.
No,
and
I
go
just
back
was-
to that.
I think it's fine.
Great.
Um,
So the election line,
Lexi,
yes,
I just wanted to, in town hall CE, talk about our HVAC system.
Yeah,
okay, do you wanna do that now and
Yes.
go back to the election line?
yeah, we'll go back to the
Okay.
election. I just want to
Okay.
make sure we get
Great.
it before we leave.
Okay, good. So if we're done with equipment, yes, let's talk about town hall contractual spending. So go ahead, Carissa, if you wanted to speak to anything there.
She does not want to speak to it, so she would like to, not to jump her gun, but I don't think you actually want to, neither do I.
So we have issues with our HVAC that have been ongoing for the past few years, and some of those issues are The upstairs has issues with keeping temperature. Angie's office has issues keeping temperature. My office, when the AC is on, it spits water everywhere. And the one down the hall also, when the AC is on, drips water. So we keep a towel on the floor. I have like towels covering half the stuff in my office where it's water is raining. Misting, but, so we've been working with, a company who's been working with, the LG suppliers who are, according to them, the experts on these systems. And also talk to LG occasionally about it, trying to figure out what the issues are. So they've kind of been going through various exploratory things to figure out what the problem is and ruling things out. But it kind of seems like what the issue is that it wasn't installed in the best way. So, it's kind of a work in progress and figuring out what the end game is. It's not disastrous, it's just, it's just a drag. So, we'll see what happens.
And we're outside of any warranty, right?
What's that?
These are quite old, so that we're outside of any warranties coverage.
It's a good question. Yeah. I think so, but I will double check.
So I think Chris is being very generous when she says that it's just a drag. It's been a tremendous amount of time for her.
Well, that too.
And it's
Yeah.
just a lot, it's just a lot of time. We're at the point where it's not reasonable. And
So Dave Snyder from the highway department has started to get involved and he has them at his house. So he came to look at them and start to get a feel for what's going on and he brought Switzer in thinking they might be able to help. They were there for a few hours and took a look around and came to the conclusion that first of all, their expertise is more on home systems versus not commercial systems, but his conclusion was that it was, probably not installed in the best way. So.
so part of the justification to going to a DPW is that under a DPW model, facilities is actually lives under a DPW. And so now, especially now that Scott has a little bit of administrative help and while it's outside of this budget discussion, Scott was the last superintendent, I believe, to get administrative support in the county, is what my understanding is. And so it's been really,
Well, yeah, no, there is one other.
Oh, there
that
is one
does
other.
not have
Okay,
administrative
okay.
support.
so I apologize.
That I work
Second
with.
to last. Second to last. And so in doing this, the goal has been to clearly start moving facilities under the DPW, but it's a transition. And so that's why we're budgeting in this budget, the $1,000 from the town hall side to pay for, Dave's time and whoever's time, because he does have building experience, to come in when they can do things that can be done internally, but then also to have them have more oversight over this, because it doesn't make sense for Carissa. She's, Carissa does a phenomenal job. But their reaches, it's absolutely true. You keep this a whole thing.
To like manage the office and hunting licenses and talk to the repair guys. It's. I'm not the best person for that job.
So we've reached the threshold where it's time now for more assistance.
So as we look through the details of this contractual budget, one of the things, you do see some money there, $3,000 for services and maintenance, which may or may not be adequate depending on what we discovered. But the other thing that I wanted to point out that's there that is new is this a consulting fee, because our solar panel leases actually are ending in January of 2026. I know that I just made a note there. I didn't have that date in this sheet. And so we definitely need to have a plan for what's going to happen with those.
It's January of
Yeah.
2026.
Yes, it's January of 2026. So the idea is that this is actually going to address the panels on this building, but as well as the highway part. To try to decide what our next steps are in terms of the lease being up. and what will happen. So, that money is set aside to help figure that out,
So the plan is to hire a consultant.
to work with us.
Look at and see what the
An
options are.
expert
and-
to understand
decide what to
what
do.
does the equipment look like? Do we want to continue? Do we want them to remove it? You know, it's not our equipment, so, you know, we have to
And then
figure
what
out
do we
what
do
we're
next?
doing and what do we do next?
Right.
So if it expires in January 2026 and we need to give Solar Liberty 1 year, we need to have this done by January 2025.
No, it's, if I recall correctly, you can't trigger it more than a year out.
Okay,
So we can start the conversations in January. They don't want to even have a conversation with us yet,
they have other projects to be thinking into.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that makes more sense.
So anyway, that
But
gives,
yes, early 2025. And we might start working on it if, it's it's my new deputy.
Yes,
Huh?
the deputy list.
It's on my deputy list to start that process and to hire a consultant. But then the money won't be actually spent until next year's budget.
Are there consultants that do that? I mean, there's gotta be.
sure.
We have deep and abiding faith that somebody in the private market provides a service.
Alright.
Okay, so. So we still have central communications and printing and mailing to review. But did you want to go back to the elections line?
I did. I had a question for you. So every year we budget 4,000 for elections, which I think is a fair amount to budget. But only once have we used it in many years. And I was wondering, is there a place to put that into reserves to use? Is there a reserve account? Like, because it seems kind of, there's no place I can, okay, never mind. That was my idea.
I mean, you
It'd be
have,
great to
I
have an election reserve.
mean, you have contingency.
Right.
That you could use for that purpose if something happened and you had to use the money. But I think that's pretty standard that people budget for it, but.
Oh,
it
no,
often
no.
Doesn't get used.
Right, and no, I want to make sure we have the money available in large measure because one of the local parties switched to a primary system, and if there's ever a primary, it will be the town's responsibility to stand up that primary. And so there is a future where we may in fact have to stand up the primary.
Yeah, I don't think there's a place
Or-
that you could easily target a reserve. for
Okay,
this,
well, I figured if anybody knew, it'd be you, so I thought it was a really good idea, and so. If New York State is
Sorry.
listening, the comptroller's office, a reserve account for elections would be awesome, so we're not budgeting for it every single year,
And they're fine.
just saying. And I think 4,000 is fair, because actually, if we have to do a standalone election, we now know it costs more than that, so.
Okay.
But
yes.
if we do a primary, if we pay for a primary, my understanding is that that would be run by Board of Elections and we pay them, we reimburse them for it. I think that's the case, but
That would make sense if there are town positions on that
Right.
ballot.
yeah, right.
Okay.
So I think it's different than the town, than a special election.
Yeah.
All right. So the last two items are central communications and printing and mailing. Central communications is a big one because our IT support is included in here. And that's been an area of, transition for the town as we address the concerns from the comptroller's report a couple of years ago. And so there is funding in here for local IT support in addition to our hosted support, which is, our network security and software upgrades and things like that. And that item is the computer room, 2 hours a week. And so as you look at this budget year over year, that's probably the biggest change that you see from year over year in terms of the funding that's set aside. So I'm not sure what else to say about that myself. I'm sure Caitlin and Krista might have more
Who
to
does the
add.
network security?
What's that?
Who does the network security?
Advanced 2000 does the network
That,
security.
is that in this? line?
That is in this. Mhm. So there's monthly support from Advanced 2000. Plus there's the local support from the computer room.
They're
And
like
then
desktop
there's-
support, right?
What's that?
Computer room is like desktop support, kind of.
Pretty much anything, I think, that we need help with, right? I'm looking at these two because they're the ones.
Interface.
I mean, what happens is that staff here might have a need or an issue. And it may be in fact Advanced 2000 who has to manage the software. But for the staff to be able to logistically implement it and understand what they're doing, the local person actually helps us with that. So they're kind of working in tandem.
Is the local person the computer room?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
right.
yes. And so for example, we were moving to two-step authentication, yeah, I can say that word. And multi-factor authentication. And I actually had set it up a long time ago, but then it didn't work. And so then so the local person at the computer room reset my account for me and then worked with me to reestablish it, and it was fine. But that's something that the local person can do easily with us, and we found that Advanced 2000,
It takes more time and it doesn't.
it's a lot more time and money because of their remote nature of how they work.
Does everybody have two-step authentication?
We do now,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, still a few people need to get it, so.
okay,
Yes.
You'll see an email about that.
That's really important.
yes, yes. So so this is to just make sure that staff have the resources they need to actually effectively utilize and implement what Advanced 2000 is administering. I guess that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I mean, computer room came in recently and set up, I was switching computers and made sure that everything was working, that I had access to everything I needed, set up my remote server access, which when it's been done through Advanced 2000, because of the nature of the separation, it's just been harder and it's been taking it. They have been able to do the job. It just sometimes takes 4 times as long. What I'm really glad about going with Advanced 2000 is that I feel a lot more secure about our data. I feel a lot more secure about the backup and our cybersecurity. That was something that we couldn't find a local company to do, but it's now, kind of at that intersection where we need a little bit of local support. But not a tremendous amount. And I mean, ideally, we're gonna come in less than 2 hours late. I don't think every week we're going to need it, but sometimes we do need it for these projects. And the computer room supported us when we made the transition to the phones. And I think it's been the most successful project we've done. It went very smoothly. And it
The records and connections that needed to happen. that
Physical
we didn't have,
work.
That none of us would have ever been able to do.
right.
And
So,
it's cheaper than having Advanced 2000 drive here.
yes, because that's not something that would be covered under our contracts with them. That would be additional costs. So. And we're not a very complicated system, but when you're working with a bigger company who has a revolving cast of support people, none of them will ever learn our system very cleanly. And for someone to be an ongoing support person who can very quickly get their arms around us and see us, it's like seeing a primary care doctor who actually remembers you, it's sometimes good to just interact with them.
So at this point, we're estimating what that
Yeah.
might be, but it's not a set time. It's just a guess on how much time we might.
And we're not under contract for receiving 2 hours a week.
No.
This is, if we don't use it, we don't use it. We
Right.
get savings, right?
The phone and internet line item was reduced because now it's split up between phone and internet in the new phone system. Because that's a significant drop.
Yes. Okay. So there was a consolidation. Now we are internet-based phones. And so it enabled us to cut a lot of cords, of course, on phone bills.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
But we do still have, how many lines do we still possess?
Something like that.
Yeah, so we still do have, there are some things that still do need a hard line, and we also, for safety purposes related to, not like an immediate emergency, like we had to do a lockdown, but more of a weather emergency, things like that, there might be sustained outages. We, this facility could serve as a emergency support facility. We wanted to make sure that we had a hard line. So we're trying to balance those, and
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I'm sure in 10 years, when they do or 20 years, when they do the next phone upgrade, they're gonna cut all the cords.
Right.
For now,
Well, that all seems pretty straightforward.
So printing and mailing hasn't changed dramatically year over year. I think just sort of the anticipated standard increases in the cost of doing business. Postage, Chris, I notice is going down. Is there a reason for that? Or maybe,
But we have the tax bill postage is new.
oh, I see, so we separated that out, so postage is not actually going down, okay, sorry, I missed
No,
that,
it's going up $500.
great. Cause postage is going up generally.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. So I don't know if there's anything you wanna comment on this, Carissa, or any other questions people have?
What, you do the tax bills come out of this, what else, what other else are your traditional, I mean, mailings that you do? That would come out of this line, these lines?
Did we budget for water bills and the water fund? I don't think we were posted on that. Don't know if we.
I'll look.
Figured that out before.
Matter micro. I think.
Let me just see.
When's your first game? Do you have a game?
But it's basically, it's
You're modified?
basically all the town mailing.
Oh,
Um,
next
we
Monday,
don't-
last Monday. 2 days.
Just reading. Really. I had to read really pretty accurate.
I don't see that in here, Carissa. I just see the software costs, so maybe that's something we wanna add in there, you know. We can take a look at that in the water budget. Cause it would be appropriate to have it in there,
Yeah.
okay. I will make a note.
But this does have, like, this is also B fund printing and mailing, and we don't split that out. If we want to try to come up with.
No,
Mm.
sorry. As the bookkeeper, I'm saying,
Panic.
no.
I see panic on Blix's face
The
right now,
central,
but-
that's why we have central services, so that we don't have to do
Yeah.
that kind of crazy accounting.
Could maybe, that could maybe be part of the comp plan, but we have a specific number,
But-
you know, project. And
Yeah, I think specific large mailings
Right.
associated with
just the.
a particular
small
project
things.
could be, you know, assigned to that project, but I think otherwise general activity would just be
Yeah.
centralized.
And it's primarily the clerks and court offices.
And the bookkeeper. Sorry,
Right.
just making a note here. Okay. So I think that covers these categories for the 9:30 session. Any other questions or comments on the clerk's area?
No.
Okay. So then we have our guests.
I'm gonna run still.
From planning and zoning, can we take a very quick break? If that's all right.
And I haven't.
We are back. We took no action. We simply, all needed to take a short break.
Oh,
If we could
thank you.
just pass
Do you want
those
these?
around. I have one of mine also too.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yep. Chairs and one for Wilson, and one for me. Hey.
Your numerical estimation was excellent.
I don't always count correctly, even though I'm an accountant, so. We'll just say that. Okay. So what you have is, on the big page, is the B fund expenditures on one side and the revenues on the other. And then on this legal page is front and back. The details of some of the contractual spending lines that are incorporated into the budget, okay? So, just start. Walking through this line by line, again, I'm, that's what people seem to want. I don't know if anybody wants me to do differently. Nope, okay. So the attorney lines in this budget are broken out between the support specific to the two boards, the planning board and the zoning board. And the other kinds of attorney support, like, for example, if you're dealing with someone who's in violation of the code and refusing to comply, right? Is that one of the issues that's going on right now? And so the budgets here are based on sort of historical spending from the current year, particularly this breakout to support the boards is a relatively new thing. So looking really at what we've seen so far this year. And some anticipated extra activity needed with code enforcement for next year.
It's actually really, I think, if I'm speaking, I don't want to go into detail. But it's actually a lot of zoning enforcement,
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
in potential increase.
it's both zoning.
Is it varying
and
both?
It's
Yeah. Okay.
fire. Building
Okay,
zoning,
so
yeah,
it's actually a combination of all the above.
yeah,
Okay,
for the 1420.4,
yeah,
the very first one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I want to draw attention to the fact that the town board. Well, if the town, I'm trying to think about how to phrase this appropriately, if the town decides to pursue legal action in certain cases, this cost will not cover the whole thing.
So, yeah, we had a lower number, and then when we chatted with Lexi, prepping for this, we increased the 2025 budget just because the two cases that we have are very large and ones that the town's been fighting for decades on, one of which the town took action and failed on, so we're trying it again. We're expecting worst case scenario, both cases are going to get appealed to Supreme Court, and so that cost we're expecting to be a lot more, and that's probably going to hit in 2025. That's why we're seeing that we're planning for 30.
Right,
Roughly.
so for financial context. We would anticipate that not everything would happen in 2025 because our legal processes are slow. So there would be costs in 2025 if both of those go to appeal. We're looking at a ballpark of $25,000 to $30,000 per case that would be borne by the town. So this is starting to budget for being able to do some of it, but I want to be really clear that we are not budgeting the full amount in 2025 to take both of those all the way there. So it's expensive to do, so.
And none of that cost can be then borne on the. defendant. I don't know
There
what
is
you
no
call it
clear
in this
answer on
case.
that. No attorney in the world is going to firmly affirm that we can recoup all the money. So you have to budget for the fact that the town would have to absorb the costs if the board made the decisions to pursue that level of legal action.
Okay.
And if we get money back, then fantastic. Different cases, and it's because of the nature of the violations. The town did pursue in court legal action 2 years ago, and we were able to recoup basically the amount the town invested in the process. But
Not sure.
again, you know, those tea leaves are not ones any attorney will, even off the record, tell you.
Okay.
So. So the long and short of it is, if we go down, if we commit to those pathways, then we will be looking mid-year, potentially mid-year, or in this time next year, we'll be looking at far more significant budgetary needs. But we thought it was prudent to include some of that, the expectation that everything wouldn't be wrapped up in two major court cases and potential 2 court cases in a single year. But there will be costs.
Okay.
So, moving on down the line, I just wanted to point out that the engineering line is not being used because we're moving towards a method of making sure that all costs associated with that are charged to the user. Because any engineering would be related to a person's project. And that's something they need to pay for. So we're not, we'll be billing them for that.
Do they pay for that upfront or is that a recoup?
Nope, we have moved to a model, so we actually used engineering. But it's a wash because we are paying for it directly out of an escrow account. So I'm very pleased to report that the establishment of escrow accounts in advance of work being completed means there is always going to be some little small amount of, like, the legal time necessary to review that escrow agreement, for instance, may not be fully billed. Or, staff time associated with it cannot be fully reflected, or ever reflected truly, but the big high costs are engineering and legal fees. And for engineering, we've been able to establish an escrow account. The town board has adopted a boilerplate escrow account, so that can be put in place immediately with a property owner in order to make sure we have money in hand before we start agreeing to activities. And it's been very financially, dare I say, successful this year in making sure that the town overall is not bearing inappropriate costs.
And then there might be cases where the property owner just gets their own study, right?
Correct.
That the board might accept and review as opposed to hiring our own. So it probably varies if it's a larger project or something like that. But at this point, the town is not going to be seeing any expenditures in that category
To the best of our ability, yes.
to the best of our
Yeah.
ability. So
So-
we're not budgeting for it.
You haven't needed any help in plan review on?
I have used a third-party plan reviewer, and that was borne by, the cost of that was borne by the applicant in their permit fee.
Yeah.
So when they paid their permit fee, that fee was automatically paid and taken care of. That was before we had the escrow account. So now they will have to pay for that upfront.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I could just see it freeing up some beer time.
Yeah.
So you're not spending
yeah,
too much time coming through drawings.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, and it's also a reflection of moving to a much more progressive model of a fee-based structure, that if these special projects require special services, it makes sense the applicant pays for them and not the town. And what we've seen in past review, and this is why having good admin is really important, is that this stuff previously was just being borne by the town, and it was just getting absorbed into town budgets. And the more that we can adequately and appropriately, we're not trying to penalize anybody, but it doesn't seem fair that the taxpayer pays for services that benefit one property owner. That's not what we should be doing. That's not what the B fund should be doing. So the more that we can pass those costs on appropriately to the property owner, and so Mark has done an excellent job of that. And Molly's helping clean up a lot of, and that brought to a lot of our attention stuff that wasn't getting done, because quite honestly, when I joined the town board in 2020, we had a code officer for 15 hours a week. And paperwork was not getting appropriately filed because the town wasn't giving them enough time to get that work done. And part, I'm sure. So we're in just a much more professional model, so.
Okay, so the contingency account, there is a contingency which is pretty much consistent with what's been budgeted over time. We don't always use it, but it's there just in case, which I think is prudent, particularly given our previous discussion about potential legal costs. And then there's a contingency for the possibility of somebody moving and this is to help cover anything that's town outside
Village.
the village, where an employee might move to a health plan who's not on one, or to a family plan who's on a single, whatever. It is a employee benefit contingency, and it's calculated based on the cost of health insurance. And that's been a standard practice of the town to do this. So that's there. So the traffic control is basically signage if it gets used. And the
We
next-
haven't used any to date,
Correct.
So that's
We
for
have-
the green address signs, we've used about $200 of that.
Oh, have you? It's just not charged there.
Just in this latest voucher cycle.
Oh, okay. So I'm like, did I miss that? Has it been posted yet? Okay, thank you. So in now moving on to the code enforcement area of the budget, or the public safety, I should say. One change here is that we're moving the code enforcement position to it is full-time now, but it's moving from 70 to 80 hours a week and absorbing,
Every 2 weeks.
I was gonna say.
sorry,
Like, you can't
a
do
paid
80 hours a
period.
week. I had a
Yeah.
question. I was like, really? We're not stressing you out that much? Okay, so it's bi-week.
Yes,
Every 2
I'm
weeks.
sorry. Yeah,
I was
40
gonna
hours
make
a
sure
week.
for you.
Woohoo.
I'm
Yeah.
not that bad of a supervisor.
No, but I was just like,
There's
you don't
plenty of
need to
room
be
for assault, but
stressing you
man.
out for 80 hours. a
Sorry,
week.
sorry about that. Sorry, Mark.
That's all right. I was just gearing up for it.
Yeah, right.
Here's some more coffee.
I think I'm the one who needs more coffee.
You need fewer towns to be running, but please stay with us.
But that is a shift, and so the funding that was for the part-time fire inspection has been moved into that line, understanding that there may be special events or high volume times, and that is we would use additional help during those times. That would be contracted out if need be, and the cost passed on
That's
to
right.
the runner of the event. So that's basically how we're looking at that now.
So connected to that, I will give you a preview of what's to come, is that we're gonna be taking a hard look at our special event permit fee. And that, I might be using the wrong term for what the fee is, but I would, it's looking at how much we're charging for a particularly related around. It's not just grassroots, but grassroots is the obvious biggest activity that of special event in the town. And Mark, you put in truly yeoman's hours. You really can work 80 hours a week during grassroots. And I
Not
just,
all year.
exactly, not all year, but I also don't think that's necessarily an appropriate or sustainable model. And I want to build in some flexibility so that you may see your house or potentially your family even during that time period. And so that it's a sustainable job for you and for whomever is in this position. And so I think it is appropriate that there is auxiliary support available and that would be reflected in the fee. The way we look at fees is what is really the cost to provide the service? Because it's not just during the event itself. Large scale events require months of planning and many hours of your time long before the event arrives, right?
Grassroots actually takes a year of planning.
I'm sure.
From the minute they close the gates, the health department, grassroots and the town are in conversations. So it's a year-long process.
Right. And that fee for 2024, correct me, was $950. The fee applied, I think was about that.
Yeah.
Yes, so $950, and it really is, well, obviously not a year's worth of time on a full-time job, certainly not. But there's work that goes into all of that, plus all the work that happens there. And so what we're gonna be doing is looking to see if that's an appropriate amount to charge and how to determine what's an appropriate amount, because if another event is coming in using the same permit, but it's a significantly less hours, that's not appropriate either to charge a flat fee. Like, we need to have logic. We're required to have logic for how our fees are put together. So for the last couple of years, we have been looking at fees and have been increasing our fees in your department and in planning and zoning. And I think it makes sense to continue that, to make sure that, again, that there's parity with fees and services and that they're being appropriately addressed, and so we shall keep doing that.
Okay. So under the contractual expenses, under the code enforcement, Mark can speak more to this, but I just wanted to point out the key things that are driving the increase, budget to budget. One is because I did add in expenses for contracting out additional fire inspections, even though there's also money in the revenue to pay for that. I added it into expenses as well. So we could always change how that's being done, but that's what I did just to make sure we didn't forget about that as a placeholder. There's also additional funding in here for, I think, for you to be able to work remotely, a tablet, right? Is that
Mhm.
something that's new, it looks like? And also for protective equipment. The,
Maybe.
yeah, the vest.
Yes.
And safety equipment for you, for the code enforcement officer. So those are the three things I see driving the big increase year over year. So I didn't know if you wanted to speak to any of the items, so this is, I'm looking at this part. Under enforcement officer E. CE.
So one thing I noticed, since taking over the fire side of, this job. That we don't have access in the town for all of the fire regulations. So a lot that's driving that would be, different memberships to, all of the different, information that I need. So that's driving that part of it. The municipal software is, that's up in the air. We did the, a workshop with the county and they're talking about where we want to head that way. The best, we talked about it a couple years ago. And we have finally ordered it. It should be arriving soon. It was ordered through the village. So that I believe we have all paid for this year. But the supply and vest $800 is to just in case something happens that the vest needs to be repaired or whatnot. We're just putting an earmark in there just in case.
At some point, it may necessitate having a second vest for a possible second person who's working as a contractor or anything like that. New York State has now allows code officers, because not everybody can have this kind of protective gear. But they've identified code officers as a profession that sadly may need them.
Yep.
Is this like a bulletproof vest?
Yes,
Sounds like.
it is 100% a bulletproof vest. 2.5 years ago at one of our conferences, our NISBAC representative was there and they fought hard because there were code enforcement officers that were severely injured doing their job. And it's just because you're one person going into a situation. What prompted us to really look at it was during a special event, we had gunfire that happened across the street. 100% legal what was happening, but what it did is it shut down the special event and it scared a lot of people. So when you have thousands of people and gunshots, we want to make sure that whoever's doing the public safety for the town side is safe.
100%.
These are the times in which we live.
Just walking onto someone's property.
Absolutely.
Yep, I have actually turned around and, well, not turned around. You never turn your back to, if you're in a situation like that, you just, thank you, I will make arrangements another time, and you just walk away.
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna keep going unless people stop me if they have other questions. The 80-10 zoning. That is essentially half of the planner position. And the contractual expenses are for the zoning board. They include the stipends we pay, any supplies they might need, public notices and publications. And any training costs or travel associated with the training needs of the board. And that's what's included in that. So there's not a lot of change year over year in that category.
So the BZA and the planning board do receive stipends.
They do.
Yes. And that happens at the end of the year, which is why you don't see a lot of that being spent until
Nope,
right now.
I just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
they do
no.
receive them.
They do.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's a bump for the chairs. It's not a big bump, but it is a bump.
And so the same thing is true under planning, although there's a lot of other items here. And again, this is where you see the clerk for the boards. Which is, so Molly's got pieces of her in lots of places. Her
Financial
position,
capabilities.
financial pieces. We hope she stays in one piece, but anyway. So but the time spent is split out between the specific clerking for the boards and the general admin support for planning and zoning. And of course, her time is also spent in supporting DPW as well, and the water district. So this is just a portion of her compensation. We don't see equipment here, but again, we do see for the planning board a similar amount of spending as we saw for the zoning board, and same stuff. And then you have the comp plan contractual expenses here. I just want to pause for a minute and mention that the timing of when that comp plan is being done is shifted. So it's going to be more in 2025 and less in 2024. But that's kind of a sort of a guesstimate. But half of those expenses, wherever they may be, are covered by a grant. So there's also grant revenue offsetting those in each of the years.
Are those milestone reimbursements?
I don't believe so, but I don't know. I think they're just expenditure reimbursements. I believe it's a,
So would it be ongoing? Because I would expect we would spend more than this in 25. It just feels like.
yeah, I don't remember the total grant amount. It's not in my head. I think it's in the $50,000 range, right?
Right, so the total project's a little over 110, and the town may need to bump that up.
Yeah.
For the whole project.
Yeah, so as far as what we have planned in 2025, I don't know. But we did lower the amount in 2024, knowing that things always take longer than you think they're going to, but
They do when you are tied to New York State's contract review process.
yeah.
So
That too. So we do expect things to start ramping up this year, but it's really gonna kick into gear in 2025.
Yeah.
So do you think things will continue on after that?
The project should wrap up, I'm hoping by October, maybe November at the
Of
latest.
next year?
Yeah.
So do we think this is enough?
Where the bump is gonna come in is whether the town decides to go with a more thorough environmental review. Right now, we're planning for like the base level. I've made my suggestions in the past, so we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
But it's probably gonna be another 20-30 maybe to do a full review, maybe.
Maybe.
Blah,
And
blah.
that would also be
That's not-
covered
Top of
50%.
100, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so this seems low then, if we're gonna finish it up next year, it's the MRV contract is 100, right?
Well, and there's a difference here. So this says 52, but this only has 34 for total.
Oh, that's probably because I changed it here and not here.
Okay.
That's my mistake.
Okay.
sorry.
No, and I don't mean to
No,
complain
no,
that out.
I
just
know,
was
I know, but
Seeing if there was something. we
yeah,
weren't accounting
sometimes
for.
there's things that were in multiple places and I might not have caught them all. So yeah, well,
yeah.
that actually shows you how much it was changed from what was originally there. It was split between the 2 years more. And I shifted more of it into 2025, 2024.
Say 75% of that contract would be in 2025.
Yeah, and the total contract is just over 100. So this needs to be updated and readjusted.
So Niels, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, but are you suggesting we should do a more thorough environmental?
It's always been my practice. Every comp plan I've worked on has done an EIS. I know the committees debated that quite a bit. We went with the contractor we chose did not go with an EIS. The other one did. So that's part of the agreement that we went into with them, is to not do an EIS, with the idea that the town, if it wants to, move forward with the EIS, we can do that. We have some time to figure that out. I mean, as far as that project's concerned, as far as the budget, I don't know if it makes sense to work on this now or to make that decision later and then change the budget as needed.
I mean, I think my inclination would be to do that because I think there are pros and cons. I mean, right, like, does doing a full EIS save us money when we're doing the actual zoning changes, which would have a real potential environmental impact? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, so what I'm used to,
I know we'll have to do it then.
Yeah.
But does it save us? What I don't want to do is pay for something twice. That is there, you know what I mean? I think it might be a broader conversation about, we're going to have to eventually pay for it. When do we pay for it? And when's the appropriate time to do it?
Right. So again, to go down too much of a rabbit hole, it might be also be a good discussion with town legal. But my experience, maybe Liz can talk more too with hers, is with the comp plan, if you do an EIS, that basically tees the town up for the next 10 years. So that if you work on, say, if you do a park and rec plan, you should do an environmental review for that one as well. And then when that happens, you can say, hey, with the comp plan in 2025, we did this EIS, everything's in alignment with that. We just approve again our previous EIS, and we call it good. Same thing with the zoning code. If you do any climate action plan, housing plan, you can always go back and refer to that. So you're actually getting more for your buck, upfront. It's an upfront cost that should last you 10 years. Until
It could be carried out through other actions that were based off of actions called for in the comp plan.
As long as it's consistent
Right.
with the comp plan.
I'm not changing things from what we stated in the comp plan.
Okay, well, that seems appropriate. That seems to me a good use of fund balance. That's an investment of one-time money in a one-time project. Where we budget it for, that becomes. Are we doing 2026? Just so we don't have that budget. Just throwing it out there.
Should you budget for the whole 100,000? Because if we're gonna finish late in the year, we might not get there.
We're already getting billed. We're already getting billed, so we already are paying in 2024.
Yeah, there was a billing last night.
Yeah,
that I saw.
So
we'll be getting monthly bills from MRB.
Right, but when would the grant money start getting back?
well, the grant money, the revenue gets recorded when you spend the money, whether we get the cash or not. So as far as the budget goes, once you spend the money, you've earned it. So the spending and the grant are gonna match up, basically.
Mhm.
So whatever you spend, 50% of that's gonna be covered by the grant. Assuming that it's eligible spending for the grant. So we just need to make sure we're clear about how much spending is actually gonna occur in what year, and that's what we gotta estimate accurately, and then I'll budget for 50% of that to be covered by the grant.
So we were at what? Bill was at just over 6,000.
Yeah, well, if we anticipate finishing, that'll be the full 100. So as soon as you spend 50,000, then your grant will be,
Well, but you only get half, so
oh, so you have to spend 100 to get to 50?
correct,
Okay.
correct.
So, I mean, if their bills are consistent, we'll be at about $30,000 in bills for MRB for this calendar year. If their bills are consistent, and there's no way to.
Right.
I can't predict what that's.
So if we have 30,000 in this year.
Yep.
Then we're gonna have another 7 next year. All right. Then I would update the revenue reporting. That's actually not gonna help this budget, but we better get it in there.
It's the big plan, big project for 2025. So
What's closer to 80? It's 110. Right?
I think
Yeah.
it's 108.
If it's 10 to 11 months, yeah.
No, so it's,
So the total spending, the total project is
Total.
and that's not counting legal costs, but that's in another part anyway, so. That's in B fund.
this is, well. Anyway,
I mean, that's a different line.
yeah.
right,
It's already reflected.
right. Okay, I will take a look at that and make sure it gets corrected. The only other item in this budget is the contractual spending for the planner. And again, that is primarily, a lot of software in there. And things related to, computer support and then the travel and professional development, which is for the staff, not for the board, which is in a separate line. Is there anything you wanted to comment on there, Niels, about that? Which is the 80/21.4, this is what I'm looking at.
I was looking at 10.4, 20.4.
Oh, you were looking at 20.4, that's the actual planning board. With the stipends and the training for the board, public notices.
Yep.
21.4 is essentially your contractual budget.
Right.
Not changing much.
Yeah, no, it isn't changing much.
So just a quick note, Esri, the company for ArcGIS is shifting from their current model, which is what's labeled here, towards online subscription only, kind of like everybody else. So we're,
Took this long.
I know, that's gonna happen the beginning of 2026, so nothing's really gonna change. Presumably, for 2025, but 2026, those numbers may increase just because it's the model of doing a month by month and factoring it out over the whole year.
And it might, and do you need more than one subscription?
It'll be, yes, myself and Molly
Right.
and part of the training here is for Molly
To learning about it,
increase her skill sets.
great.
Again, GIS. I think you'll see much better than I did.
Looking into it for DPW too.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. It's a great skill to have. My brain does not work that way though, so.
Okay, the next thing is, there's an item that I put in a separate category called water testing, which was a request from the Water Source Protection Committee, is that the name of the committee?
Yep.
And, that, so if you look at the detail sheet, I didn't actually change it on here. But I did, pull out the highlighted yellow item from the 8790.4. Which isn't really, changing dramatically from year to year. Actually, there's some things that went down just a little bit. But there is a new added item from this committee to do, a large scale water testing initiative.
Yes.
Okay. And that's almost $23,000 in an estimate of their proposal. So that's there.
And this is in addition, I know we went over this the other day, but this is in addition to what DOH is already asking to do more testing, a second round of testing.
Yeah,
In
they're
the
doing
town.
another 50 properties. my recollection from the reporting. They're doing another, so this would be an additional. If I recall correctly. Additional 100 properties in the tune of $130 per test. Some money to go to CSI for data support, and it would also. The committee would like to hire somebody for 5 weeks at $30 an hour, which is high for what, basically want to hire a student intern at $30 an hour, which is pretty high of a salary in terms of what we pay staff. So I have some concerns about that. And then there's just over 5,000 budgeted for public education, events, mailing. So comes to the range of around 17,000 is for the testing and staff. And then an additional 5.
So is this just a quick, I've been listening to Roxanne's reports on this. So we're going through a second round, or we just finished a second round. Has the town paid anything so far, or has that been all under grant so far?
That's the
think that was-
Department of Health. They're coming through, so they came through and did an initial sampling. To get a geographical spread, basically to see water quality in the town. And there were flags for concern. And so they're coming back and I think they're here this week. Doing additional tests for another set. And so at the end, we'll have a lot of information about a wide distribution in the town. And so this is above and beyond that. When this request came in, it was before the Department of Health was coming back to do a second round. So we discussed this when Rich was present on Monday, and he raised the suggestion of potentially spreading this out over multiple years, potentially, or waiting until it came up in conversation also about the timing of it, because the water source protection plan hasn't been completed yet. And so this is a big ticket item in a hard year. And so I think water course is very important. I think people having access to clean drinking water should be a right, not a privilege. But it doesn't change the fact that this is a lot of money in a year when can you talk about where we're looking at reserves overall on the beach?
Yep, when we can look at revenue. So if you flip the page. Fund balance, yeah, and you look at the revenue side. What's the red here, which is how much fund balance we have to use to balance this budget, which is actually going to get worse when I increase the comp plan stuff that was under stated, is appropriating more than what we have available for our fund balance policy. So that is a challenge because and we are in fact increasing fees. All of these fee amounts include bumps in what we're charging. However, if you look at 2024, there was a sort of one-off $40,000 permit fee. That's great. It's adding to fund balance and it's giving us more to appropriate. But that's not going to be easily repeatable. So
and it reflects literally years of work. So we're getting the one-time payment. It is years of work.
So you can't budget for that again, obviously. But we are bumping up the numbers for our, sort of our normal anticipated activity. For passing more costs on to the users and for increasing our fees. So, but the 133 that's here right now is just slightly exceeds the amount available we have based on our fund balance policy by a few $100s. And if I increase the amount for the comp plan, it's not only it's gonna in the current year and next year it's going to reduce what's available in fund balance and appropriate more than, even more than over than what we have. So that's the challenge we have in B fund. Because other than the fees we charge, the only other thing we have going into funded is sales tax. And I have already shifted more sales tax to B fund as a percentage of the total. Just kind of moving on a plan to gradually shift more sales tax revenue
Yeah.
into B fund from, say, A.
And we've been doing that now for a couple of years.
Which has a tax base, so I'm not sure that I would recommend shifting it more. Cause I've already made quite a bit of an adjustment there to try to get more revenue into B fund. So
No new sources of revenue.
that's kind of
More
where we're
costs.
at here.
So-
Um,
Can the 26,000 that's under state aid planning studies, that will be increased if we're looking at 75 to 80% of the contract for
It
next year,
will,
right?
so what'll happen is, if you look at the projection, 2024 end of year projection numbers, this 7,500 will increase accordingly when I increase the 15,000.
Mhm.
But half of that will still drop to the bottom line, right? So, if I double that, say to 30 or whatever we decided, that's gonna be another 7,500 that's gonna come out of fund balance in the current year. And then next year, if I increase that 50 to 80, that's another 15,000 that's gonna come out of fund balance in the next year. So this 133 number is gonna go up to, 150. And we're gonna have less of it available even then to appropriate. So that's that's a back of the napkin estimate.
Well, grab another napkin because, no, you've heard this question. So for the EIS, in order for the EIS to be a part of that process, I'm assuming we would have to complete the EIS before we adopted the comp plan. And so if we want to adopt the comp plan in 2025, which is deep and fervent wish of, I know, our planner, and I'm sure the committee.
I know it's happening next year.
we-
We're gonna lose me.
we would need to budget for an EIS. If that's the direction the town wants to go in, I mean. So that's not reflected in this budget either. And what are you saying, it's budget ballpark of $5,000? I know it's not. $20,000.
20 to 30. Is that what you said?
30, I think, would be the high end. Because they already have some of it included in their budget.
Yeah.
It just would be expanding what they already included. So they were just doing FEAF, right?
Correct.
So you're saying an additional 25 or part of the work, the additional 30? Okay. So I think we need to at least bring it to the board to look at that, which is, that's
you gonna
probably
talk
gonna
to me?
get, I think we need a separate line item. Can we do a separate line item in the budget for this? So
I
that
can
we're
also reach
clear
out
what it's
to
for,
Matt, see what he thinks the cost would be.
because we could can we hire them to do it, or is that considered a
No,
conflict
that's-
of interest?
no,
That's
that's-
totally fine. Oh, yeah.
Because they're already doing part of it.
Right,
It's just they're doing
Yeah, we already,
the condensed
as soon as it
version.
came out of my mouth. I could.
Yeah.
I already knew the answer, so.
It's just an additional step. We're gonna have to, as lead agency, declare a positive deck, which pushes into the EIS.
Well, it makes sense to use the same firm. Because of.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, so I think, would you mind, are you gonna reach out and find out what soft quote on that would be?
From
That would
Matt,
be
yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, I can do that. Do we know if there's additional outside sources of funding to support activities like this?
Which activities?
The
Like the
environmental
comp-
impact study, the water testing, the things that we're talking about that is kind of one-time activity that we don't have fund balance for. We just don't have that available for. I know it's kind of late in the game.
What I was thinking and hoping too.
Yeah,
Has the committee talked about grants for water source testing?
I don't recall it. The only one I'm thinking of is the DOH that we're doing right
Okay.
now.
I
think-
wonder if, once the plan is published, if the results are showing some
Concern.
concerns,
Yeah.
then maybe there's something we can go after
Yeah,
to get that accounted for, because then we have the documentation. Right now, we're just saying we want people's wells tested, but I think the report's gonna come up with some conclusions that.
the report should help and also the results of conclusive
Right.
results from DOH. To be able to then go, maybe there are state sources, because I think it's really important to do this. I just don't know how we pay for it right now. That's.
Yeah, so if
And
we
maybe we
could
can talk
focus
to
on
MRB. about
trying to
being
find out if
efficient.
there's
Hmm.
outside
in the
resources
EIS.
for these. That would be good.
When's
Because the
the,
EIS, I mean, part of it is the existing conditions, which they're already doing as part of the comp plan.
Right.
So it's really looking at the potential impacts.
which is what the IS is all about.
Right, so it's, part of it's gonna be done as part of the comp plan, so maybe we can. Suggest that they're very efficient in the EIS.
Let's see,
Yes,
on the B. 2401 interest and earnings,
yes.
would that be affected by the loan that we approved last night?
No, you're talking about the interfund loan?
Yeah, I
No.
mean, we'll still have enough in that account for the. What are you figuring, the 3% interest?
Yes, this is, well,
Cause you said, no terminology, but you said you liquidated one of the CDs, I think.
right, so let me just back up a minute. So the interfund loan that was discussed last night doesn't impact B fund at all. It's just in relationship to
That would be, mixed up, it was, they were both in the same fund, would it be?
it has to do with the bridge,
Right.
so it's
This-
DA.
Do you-
DA, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
got bridge. B.
So that's for the, yeah.
Hey, thank you, it's a
Yep,
great question.
Yep, so
Okay,
that's
no.
DA, and so that doesn't impact this. However, your question is an interesting one because we're talking about utilizing more fund balance. My interest revenue assumptions here are based on investing fund balance. And so if we end up using more of it, especially if it gets used up earlier in the year, then we may have less to invest. Because right now, I'm just looking at this. Well, actually, 300 probably is okay, because, I don't know, I'm thinking on the fly, so another napkin here.
And then interest rates increase at all?
No.
No, they're decreasing, so I'm being pretty conservative with 3%. We talked about that a little bit on Monday with some
Yeah.
of the other funds with Rich,
And Rich thought 3% was a good.
was fair,
Was what I
yeah. Right now, we're getting closer. We're, to 5%, but that's not gonna stay, so actually, if we do spend this fund balance, then we're probably, by the end of the year, we'll have half that. And so we may not have as much to invest for the whole year, certainly at the beginning of the year. we should. So that could impact this number a little bit if we really plan to use all the fund balance, which I hope we don't, but. That's basically where we would be, yeah.
So for the water stuff, the 22,000, that Department of Health, did I get that right? Are they the ones that's coming with a report?
Mm-mm.
No, so, no. So the Water Source Protection Committee is working with which DEC, DEC, employee from DEC to put together. A Water Source Protection Report. And independently from that, Department of Health, they're going statewide and they're trying to get representative samples to get sense of water quality statewide. And so they came and did us. And then because we triggered some certain numbers, they're coming back and doing this again. So we're connected. And I think because of the Water Source Protection Committee was working with the DEC, I think it helped maybe move us up the line for DOH testing. But those are happening kind of in parallel trajectories, but then the Water Source Protection Committee will have access to that data, but not the specific.
Well, I thought the idea was also that once we complete the water source protection plan, then that would somehow make us more eligible to apply for.
It's supposed to feed into the comprehensive plan
Yes.
too.
I was gonna say, when is that gonna be done, like at least?
This year,
this
Right,
year?
it was supposed, it's basically on a years away.
Similar to the comprehensive plan. Yes.
So
Increase the Variance a little bit, see.
it will be done before the comp plan.
So it can help influence
Yeah.
or,
Yeah, inform.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
So our deadline's before October next year, sounds like.
Okay.
I heard that, I mean, not the last report, but last I heard the deadline, you guys were gonna have it done by November, is that still the date? That was the date,
Well,
June,
I'm not getting the warm fuzzy with the,
oh dear.
because those people keep turning over
Yeah.
Sure, rural water.
and he sounds overwhelmed. Like they
Cool.
put him in the position and there's other towns, I think, that are, asking the same things of him. That's just what it feels like, and it's all on Zoom anyway, you're looking at cameos of everybody. So that's, hopefully we can. Because the meetings have been spread out.
Liz is leaving, so we're gonna close the public meeting, so can I have a motion to close?
Motion to me.
Second?
Second.
Okay,
Whatever.
thank you, everybody,
Go
for
for it.
joining our public meeting.
Thanks, everyone. See you Friday.